All right. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me all right. And thanks for joining today's webinar. I know people are still trickling in, but we have a lot to talk through. And so I'm going to go ahead and kick right off. And people who are coming in, I think we'll still get the bulk of the great content. So this webinar is going to be on remote permitting and inspection best practices with a kind of focus on solar, and then as everyone I'm sure is aware, kind of all in the context of COVID-19 and the impacts that's had on municipal permitting and inspection practices, but also with a focus on kind of the long-term potential of these tools, platforms, and concepts. As an introduction, my name is Kelsey Reed. I'm with the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and we've been a state agency focused on developing the clean energy sector in Massachusetts here. And we've been working in the space of solar and to some degree with inspectors and municipal departments for some time. We've partnered previously with organizations like CBANE on some of the kind of code update trainings they've done. We've worked with other consultants like the Interstate Renewable Energy Council and IBTS to provide trainings for building and electrical inspectors on solar PV inspections and best practices. And this is kind of a continued effort to help ensure we're playing a role and serving in that space. This webinar particularly was driven by some kind of discussions we've had and interaction with municipalities and hearing of their struggles, particularly with the challenges of COVID, and wanting to help support kind of information sharing amongst municipalities about the remote, both permitting options and inspection options that are out there that can, help them keep things moving forward during times like this. So we are partnered with a bunch of excellent partners, including SolSmart, who's a national organization focused on assisting municipalities with solar and solar development, as well as MAPC, the Green Communities Division from DOER, and even folks from NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, who many of which will kind of speak a little bit throughout the presentation. Anthony, we can go to the next. So just as a quick agenda for what we're going to go through today, we're going to go through some quick introductions of who all these partners are, and then SolSmart is going to speak to a bunch of the best practices and resources they've developed looking at this question nationally. And then we're going to have three wonderful speakers from Gardner, Lowell, and Brockton actually talking to their remote permitting and inspection processes. And we hope that's where a lot of the value is. A little bit about Solar App from the team at NREL working on that, which we'll get to later. And then lastly, hopefully plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So hopefully you all think of those questions as we go on. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Chad Laurent from the SolSmart team.
Great, thanks Kelsey. You can go to the next slide. Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, this is Chad Laurent, principal at the Cadmus Group, and also we participate in the SolSmart program, which is a Department of Energy national designation program, which many communities in Massachusetts and the MAPC have participated in. And communities can take steps to reduce what are called soft costs. So things like the time that it takes to get solar approved within communities and all the non-hardware costs related to those processes, which account for more than half the cost of a solar PV station and are often under local control. And if communities adopt best practices, they get designated as gold, silver, or bronze, depending on the level of and number of steps that they've taken. And then there's free technical assistance available for any community that wishes to participate. So feel free to reach out if there is any interest in that program, either to myself and Anthony, who's also on the call from Cadmus, or to the folks at MAPC. Kelsey gave a great introduction to MassCEC, a really sort of marquee organization and group here in Massachusetts that supports a lot of clean energy development and innovation across Massachusetts. We're really lucky to have them here. I think many of the states that we work at in SolSmart wish they had someone like an MAPC in their, or a MassCEC in their state. And then MAPC, similarly, folks, are thrilled to be working with them. They do regional planning efforts, mostly in the metropolitan Boston region, but we've also worked with them on national level programs that collaborate across different planning agencies across the country. So they do a lot of really great work helping communities sort of do better by collaborating and aggregating across their entire network. The Green Communities Division, of course, part of DOER. Regional coordinators that help communities receive the Green Communities designation in Massachusetts and then are eligible for all sorts of grants. Again, a program that is the envy of many other parts of the country in terms of providing that level of support. And then, of course, NREL, sort of a marquee national lab based out in Colorado that has sort of fantastic science and engineering and research work that they do, and happy to have Jeff Cook from NREL on this call, who will talk about some of the work they're doing specific to permitting and solar apps. So a great group of folks here, and in particular from Gardner, we have Daryl Sweeney. From Lowell, Eric Slagel, and Brockton, we have Renee Dozier and Christopher Sheehan, who will talk about specifically things that they're working on. So next slide. So as part of SolSmart, we have some national best practices on permitting and specifically remote permitting and inspection available. And just some of the highlights, and I'm going to make these next few slides go pretty quickly so we have more time to hear from the communities or actually on the ground implementing these things. But you know, the first real step is sort of to move the permitting application process online, if possible. There's all sorts of different permits that are now being moved online, and solar shouldn't be the exception to that. Adopting a simplified permit process can be helpful, and that's because, you know, roughly 85% of all rooftop residential solar PV systems are basically the same in terms of their design. And so a simplified process can basically identify, hey, if you're installing one of those standard systems that we're seeing, it can save a lot of time to just standardize that and save resources for permitting and inspection staff, because get them familiar with that one type of installation, and then they don't have to spend quite as much time reviewing if it meets all of those standard you know, basic solar PV rooftop PV system. And then allowing for remote plan checks and inspections. So we've seen communities across the country use, you know, their cell phones to use like a FaceTime or Zoom or Teams or other platform video call where you can walk through an inspector remotely. In other states, there have been issues with trying to do an inspection on the roof, and so the installer goes up on their ladders when they're up there and takes pictures or live video of inspection. So there's ways to do some of those things remotely, which were a time saver even before COVID, but during these times can be particularly helpful and useful to sort of supplement whatever the regular inspection processes that you have are in place. Next slide. So getting into a little bit more detail, many communities accept permitting applications through email or an online platform, or even sort of processing them by phone or by check or even through a Dropbox can be helpful. So we've seen communities put up you know, remote ways to, instead of having to go into the office and fill things out in person and submit things in person, simply allowing those things through electronic transfer and submission can be helpful, particularly these days. Next slide. And so a simplified permit process, I sort of walked through this before, but a sort of simplified review, remember, for those standard systems. Not all systems are the same, and certainly commercial systems, or if a system is flagged as being outside that range of a typical rooftop system, can make it a simplified, establish sort of clear guidance for installers and others when they're meeting that checklist, and it just minimizes unnecessary delays. But what we've also seen is when you have those clear guidelines and checklists, it reduces the administrative churn from a permitting and inspection department standpoint, in that you're not getting applications that are filled with errors. It's clear sort of what you're asking for, so that you don't have to spend time reviewing them multiple times, and so you can get a sort of a better application from the solar installer. And again, making sure that these systems are installed in a safe way, up to code, by the right folks. But if they check those boxes, there's a way. If you go through those checklists, it can just help streamline it, and most importantly, save time on the folks within the municipalities that are in charge of permitting and inspection. Certainly, it saves the installers time and money, and homeowners appreciate getting their systems approved speedy in a speedy fashion as well. But really, it can help improve the efficiency and valuable time that the municipalities have to spend to make sure that these systems are installed in a safe way. Next slide. And I think finally, again, just a little bit more color on the resources for remote planning and inspection. So like photos or live video tours. Folks can work remotely or virtually on both sides, and time around inspection, so we're not slowing the development of solar PV where appropriate. And an example of that is in New York State, that's developed a photo inspection checklist, and we can send around the link, and we can share this slide deck with everyone who's on the call as well. So there's all sorts of sort of creative and innovative ways, and apart from solar PV, it's also things like air source heat pumps and other technologies that might require an inspection. There's ways to do this remotely, where you're still checking safety measures and making sure that you're meeting all the state and local requirements. Next slide. All right, so enough of me talking. First up on our list, we're going to hand it over to Daryl Sweeney, who's the inspector of wires for Gardner, Massachusetts, to talk about his experience and their experience in Gardner. Daryl.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm not only just the inspector for Gardner, I also Hubbardston, Templeton, Barry, and Phillipston. So I'm very busy in this field.
There you go.
Yeah. Yes, and we in Gardner and Hubbardston, we have the software Viewpoint, which is actually open government now, and that's all. Those two towns are 100% online permitting. They don't like to see any paperwork come in. Everything really wants to go over online for filing the applications. It makes it a lot easier for reviewing. Plus, we get to go back and forth with comments. So it actually cuts down on emails and phone calls, because everybody gets a notification when something new comes to that application. And pretty much most of the big solar companies out there really respond very well with documentation. Matter of fact, in my opinion, too much documentation. Some of it can be really streamed back, because I really don't need to know all the information on the individual, the licensed individual, because all that is done now through the database that this software actually collects it through. So if a license expired, I already know about it. If it's suspended, I already know about it. So some of that information they can really stream back. Like I said, the big solar companies, they send an awful lot. My next step is to actually have them highlight their model numbers, because sometimes they give us a lot of information that covers a lot of the product. And we're just really looking for their product that's in that scope. So if they could highlight that stuff, that would really streamline from us taking a look at the documentations, just to make sure that the equipment that they're putting on the rails or the inverters, that it all matches up correctly. And then when it comes to inspections, I really like this virtual inspection. We're using this, the platform Google Dual, because of the Android phones that we carry. And what I do is I usually send off in the comment box that this is what we're doing. We want to see the rails, we want to see the deck boxes, the wire management, and obviously the final, and if there's a rapid shutdown to go along with that. Most of them are compliant, which is really nice. I've had so far 6 systems that were actually completed in one day. They weren't the biggest systems, but they did have a good sized crew there. We were able to take a look at the rail system before they put in any panels down. And then when they were done with that, they chimed back in the same time, probably an hour later, with the deck box already made up. Because usually the deck boxes are buried under the panels. The time you get there for a final, it's something you can't see, and you have to really rely on pictures. And pictures, you know what? Unless the pictures, you recognize the roof, or they take a snapshot of the building permit or the electrical permit next to that, you really don't know. Most of the, like I said, most of the bigger companies, they take thousands of pictures, and they're clearly not going to cheat you out of a deck box. And then I think it was probably about 3.5 hours later, they chimed back in right before they got down from the roof to show me the wire management underneath there. It was all tucked up nicely, no sagging wires. And then when they got down, we did a final rapid shutdown of the whole system. We did this 6 times for 3 different vendors. And so that was 6 systems that were actually passed. And they had all the inspections in one day. We couldn't do this without this virtual, because there's no way that you can run across town each time 4 or 5 times to one job and approve it. So this worked out very, very well. And I'm pretty sure that the contractor, including the homeowner, were very pleased that from the time they started before the end of the day, they actually had an approved system. So it's been working very, very well for us. And I extend this even more in the electrical field to help with this virtual inspections. It allows us to do a lot more. And the guys are actually really cooperating, because they enjoy it too, because it allows their jobs to move forward that much quicker. It allows them to get to the next step. So it's been working very, very well for us. And I'm going to see if I can encourage the office and the municipalities that I work for, that we keep going in this direction, because I really do think that this is the way to the future, to streamline a lot of jobs, that we can get these things off our books, and we can move on to the next projects. Does anybody have any questions?
Thanks, Daryl. And hey, everyone, I know we've had a lot of folks log in sort of over the last 15 minutes or so. So a reminder to all that this is being recorded, and everyone is currently on mute. But if you want to type a question in the question panel, there should be a little dialog box that pops up if you're on GoToWebinar. If you want to type questions in there, feel free to do so. And then we're going to open up everyone, or unmute everyone towards the end to ask any questions of any of our panelists at that time. But if you have a burning question you want to type in the question box, I can field one of those before we unmute folks. So just a couple of logistical reminders there. Thanks, Daryl. That was great stuff. And next, I think we'd like to hear from Eric Slagel from Lowell.
Thank you very much,
Take it away.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
So I'm the Director of Development Services here in Lowell. We are the department that handles all of the permitting for the city. So everything, including all the electrical and solar permits, comes through this office. I wanted to talk a little bit about our experience going forward with online permitting. This is a process that the city started a little while before the pandemic. We currently use, for all of the city functions, we currently use Munis. So I don't know how many municipalities use Munis for their permitting, but Munis, which is primarily a financial software, financial auditing software, also has a permanent code enforcement module that Lowell uses for its in-house permitting. And as part of that module, they have a customer self-service portal that allows you to roll out online permitting, and that's what the city has been working towards for a little while now. Obviously, we, like many folks in the Commonwealth, shut down at the beginning of the pandemic to customer interactions. So we didn't have any customer time in City Hall for the first couple of months. We started doing our remote permitting via the mail, obviously, and email and over the phone. That was something that we kind of allowed sporadically before that, but the staff kind of worked through the kinks by necessity, and we did a lot of our remote permitting that way at the beginning of the pandemic. I want to talk a little bit about kind of some of the challenges that we had in our online permitting system. So this is just dealing with Munis, and kind of why we chose it and where we are now. So we switched over to Munis for all of our permitting in 2009. By 2012, we consolidated our departments, so the electrical inspections were also included. So 2012, we started doing all the electrical permitting. We began building out the structure for online permitting in late 2018. And then obviously, as the pandemic hit, we fast-tracked the online permitting, which had run into a couple of snags actually from our end. We chose Munis because of the city's pre-existing commitment to Munis and other departments. So Munis was the financial tool that Lowell used for, as I mentioned, auditing, treasury, and all of its financial kind of background. And so it was kind of a natural move by the city to take that same program and switch it over to permitting. In part, we did that in order to maintain our consistency across the departments and enable interdepartmental access to the information, and enable things like permit holds and permit financial collection to work across departments. So if somebody doesn't pay for their building permit or their electrical permit in our office, we can put a hold. That hold shows up in every department in the city. And the same thing with unpaid fees or fines. We can easily roll those onto the taxes or hold permits in other departments if they have something unpaid in our department. So those are the primary driving forces for us to choose Munis, and the same forces were behind our choice to maintain Munis as our online permitting system. That is not to say it was without challenges. One of the challenges of the Munis system is that it is a financial system and not a permitting system. We have some staff who've worked in municipalities that had standalone permitting modules that in some ways are more streamlined than Munis is. And because they're built for permitting, they a little bit more intuitive for the permitting process. But we had to make a choice as to whether or not we wanted to trade off the interconnectivity for kind of training up an entirely new module. Some of the challenges we worked on were, and one of the kind of background challenges was actually a financial one, which was we made the determination that we needed to tether online permitting to a payment system, obviously, because we wanted all of the permits to be paid for prior at the time of application as opposed to at the time of issuance. There was some disagreement on the financial team as to how that payment system was going to work. And that was one of the challenges that we had to work through. For anybody who's thinking about this, regardless of the system, it's important to get your financial team on board as soon as possible, because in our experience, at least in my experience, that having those things untethered, having the payments have to be separate from the application process, doesn't make any sense at all. And so you're obviously going to have your treasurer and your auditor and your CFO, if you have one, need to kind of sign on to whatever system you have in order to make sure that that financial piece works. Some of the other challenges were customers' learning curve. I think that's an issue with every online permitting system that's out there. You have a pool of applicants, and I know that we're here to talk about solar. So a lot of the solar businesses are fairly sophisticated, and so they were some of the first folks that we rolled into working with our online permitting system. You also have a collection of kind of old school contractors who may not be as sophisticated for online permitting. And I think the goal of the city is the same goal as I think Daryl's municipalities are, which is to have all our permitting be electronic and to eliminate paper. And so that means you're gonna have to train up the folks who to whom that is a challenge. The city did not use any grant funding for this. This was entirely self-funded. And so it was something that was done as the funding became available through the general budget. Let's see. So I guess, you know, we are still in the implementation phase of online permitting, and so I think one of the things that we found out initially is that there are benefits to the staff for online permitting. There's also some challenges built in because unlike if a person's at the counter and dealing directly with the staff, it's easier to explain and let people know about missing information if they're standing in front of you than sometimes it is when your only communications are electronic. It's the same challenge we had when we were doing just permits via email, is that there can be a gap and we don't necessarily always get the permits out as quickly as we'd like. When at the counter, you can tell someone that you need X, Y, or Z document or information, and they can either get on the phone and provide it or go out and immediately bring it back. Sometimes there's a gap between getting an application, responding to whether or not it is complete or not, and then getting more information back from the customer. So there's a little bit of lifting that's on the staff level, a little more follow-up electronically than you have when you're doing in-person permitting. So tracking and follow-through is something that we've had to work on. Kind of the time that we are saving on the staff level from data entry is being converted to tracking and follow-through. So our online permitting is, we're hoping that it comes out to be kind of a wash for staff time. And that the main benefit is the convenience for the customer and the ability to handle more customers at a time, in theory, if they're all working from home. So we have seen a decrease to the in-person permitting since we rolled it out. It's a relatively small decrease because it is relatively new. We expect that to increase, especially from the more sophisticated contractors to whom this is kind of like a thing that they do in other municipalities regularly. And we are going to be rolling out more permits as the fall goes on. We do not do remote inspections, so one of the reasons why I'm interested to hear about other folks' experience with remote inspections. But for online permitting, that's kind of the story from Lowell. So appreciate you guys taking the time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Eric. We've had a few questions come in, but I think first we're going to turn it over to Renee Dozier and Christopher Sheehan from Brockton to talk about their experience, and then I'll walk through the 3 or so questions that have been submitted so far. So Renee and Chris, take it away. And it sounds like you are, well, the lack of sound indicates to me that you are still muted. Anthony and Kelsey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Okay.
Renee or Chris? All
How
right.
we doing?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, we're having a little Wi-Fi trouble here in Brockton.
No problem. I've been there.
How
Go
about
for it.
picture now? What do I hit the little?
You can just speak to,
Okay.
if you want.
All right, we're ready to go. Basically in Brockton, we're all our permitting is online. They use a People's GIS system. And that's handled basically by the administrative staff that is here with us. And between Renee and I, we have a 35-hour work week, of which now we're 50% remote of the office. So that being handled by the front office is just where we want it. What we want to get into is the remote inspection part of this, because we review the permits, make sure they're correctly filled out, the job description is there, and the correct fee has been paid. After that, that's left on the administrative side, and then we pick up with the inspectional side. Now, I don't know if you were able to get our minimum requirements up on the screen that we kind of just came up with on our own. Yeah, that's it. So we basically hope for this, and it's pretty self-explanatory what we're looking for. If we can get all of this and it's done properly, we usually ended up with a passed inspection. Our big thing with this scenario is usually connectivity, where we're not getting a good connection, freezing video, garbled speech, that kind of thing. That is the biggest challenge we're having with it. We are able to, we probably handle in excess of 2,000, we're on the mark for excess of 2,000 permits a day, a year. And we're headed that way so far this year, and the bulk of them this year being solar inspections. So this is advantageous to us, and I believe the contractor, if they can come up with the connectivity and access. Renee, you got anything you'd like to add?
Nope, you did it.
We're mostly concentrated on the inspectional side. And one thing I would like to bring up, in addition to that, was an advisory from the Commonwealth of Mass Division of Professional Licensure in August. And they stated that inspectors should ensure their inspections are conducted safely. However, they are reminded that a remote inspection would not be considered the required final inspection under the laws and regulations governing electrical work. Inspectors are further reminded that their inspections remain subject to Mass General Laws, Section 143 and 3L. So we're still going to continue to do them in this manner until our COVID issue here in the city has been rectified somewhat. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. Any questions?
Great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, one of our other panelists spoke to the board advisory, so it was helpful to hear your take on that. Would be curious to hear Eric and Daryl your take on that as well.
I can throw out my 2 cents. I know that, like I said, we are just kind of interested in the kind of remote inspections. There has been some concern from staff about remote inspections not because of this advisory, but because of, I think, the things behind it, which are how can we be confident that the inspection is capturing everything it needs to capture? And that's the challenge for a remote inspection in the first place, right? So it seems like the state is also concerned about that. And so that would be, I mean, I don't have any answers, I guess. It's just, I think that there's maybe the answer is do it for everything up to a final and then have a final in person. That wouldn't really help if you're only doing one inspection for these solar information. So that's just kind of my 2 cents.
All right. The other question that came through for the group, are any citations or violations corrected on site immediately when there's a remote process going on or through video? Any experience with that from 3 communities?
Yeah, this is Daryl here. Yeah, no, I experienced that one myself where the inspection stops. A lot of times is they don't have what they need to get that final inspection, especially if it comes with labels and stuff like that. Or the other one I had was torque mark in, let's say, the line side taps. That's one of the requirements, is that I actually want to see the torque marks. And so we would have to stop the inspection, and then they would schedule it for a later time.
Great. Another question from one of the folks on the line. Are these types of remote permitting practices used solely for the residential rooftop solar space, or have any of you used them for larger distributed generation, net metering or solar PV arrays as well?
I've strictly kept mine to residential solar inspections of doing remote. On the larger scales, obviously it's way too large. Plus it's an open venue that you can really keep your distance where you're not going to have contact with pretty much anybody. So mine's strictly to residential. The commercial, the larger commercials, I go out to see all the larger commercial ones.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
We're strictly using the remote video inspections now in Brockton for occupied dwelling units while we're operating again in the red COVID-19 state. We believe that the larger jobs all submit COVID-19 safety regulations and affidavits to adherence to that COVID-19 safety. So again, we're using it for mostly single-family dwelling unit inspections because we're not entering them during the state of emergency.
Makes sense. Okay. I don't see any other questions coming through the chat at the moment. So I think at this point, we'll turn it over to Jeff Cook at the National Renewable Energy Lab to talk about the solar app program. And as some of our other partners on SolSmart, like the Solar Foundation, which is the lead for the technical assistance part of SolSmart, and ICMA, which leads the designation part of SolSmart, have collaborated with NREL, and there's others that are working on this effort that Jeff is going to speak to. So Jeff, thanks for joining us, and take it away.
Yeah, happy to be here. I just want to make sure you can hear me. Is that true?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is Jeff Cook. I've been here at the lab for 6 years. I've been in our markets and policy group throughout my time here, and I'm really excited to talk to you all today about the Solar Automated Permit Processing Platform, also known as Solar App, and now colloquially known as Solar App Plus. And so we can go to the next slide, and I can jump right into it and give you guys a sense of what the Solar App is. So we've talked a little bit today about virtual permitting, and we've talked a lot about remote inspections as well. And that's really where the Solar App is located, or we're focused at the nexus of that to help folks make that leap if they're not online right now, to being online, and not only online, but instant permitting for solar in certain situations. And so that's what the Solar App idea is to deliver instantaneous permits for residential solar and battery storage systems, and importantly do that at no cost to the AHJ. So we want to meet jurisdictions where they're at to be able to provide this service to them, and then the contractors pay for every permitted system that they receive on a fee per permitted system basis. And so that's what the Solar App idea is, and the Solar App Plus, in that it's going to be both, at current, it's focused around delivering instant permits for eligible residential rooftop systems with solar to start, storage by the end of the calendar year. At current, we automate that permit compliance review based on the 2017 National Electrical Code and the 2018 I codes, the IRC, IBC. For those in Massachusetts, as you know, you're on the 2020 National Electrical Code. And so at current, Solar App isn't ready for you, but it will be at the end of the year. We've automated that compliance check with the model codes, working with a variety of partners that you see here on the screen, including the International Code Council, the International Association of Electrical Inspectors, the National Fire Protection Association, and UL. And so those are the key code officials, as well as a variety of jurisdictions that were a part of this effort, and contractors, as well as other subject matter experts. And so the tool is designed in two ways. So a lot of the folks on this call already have some type of online permitting software like OpenGov that was mentioned earlier. And so the idea of Solar App is to not replace what you already have, but to augment or support your existing software system. So like for OpenGov, what would happen is a contractor goes through the process you can see on the top of the screen there. In the Solar App, they submit their plan for a review in Solar App. Solar App delivers an approval or rejection, depending on what inputs the contractor puts in, and then the contractor takes that approved plan and just uploads it into your permitting system that can check for validations of licenses, make sure they pay, all those types of things, and then deliver an instantaneous workflow in that, which is what we've already enabled with OpenGov. So that's really exciting stuff. So like I said, integrates with your existing software. And then I'm just going to end by saying, for those folks, at least on this slide, that are interested in participating and possibly piloting the application when we've gotten it ready for Massachusetts deployment in 2020, definitely you can reach out or look at that survey link there. If we actually go to the next slide, I believe it's also listed there again, in addition to all of the other webinars and information we've had. So I didn't give you a sense or a demo of the software today for lack of time, but you can pull up any one of these webinars that has a demo in it. You can pull up the benefits memo. You can also, again, sign up for piloting at that link there as well. And so I'll pause there and kick it back to the team here, and thanks so much for the time to introduce Solar App to you today.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Appreciate it. And I'm not seeing any additional questions come through, but I think at this point we can unmute folks and feel free to either put a question in the chat box or speak up if you have a question.
Chris from Brockton, I have a question.
Yeah.
I saw in one of your earlier slides there that New York had a photo inspection checklist. We're always trying to improve what we're trying to do here. Is there access to that checklist somewhere?
There is. There's an embedded link here, and we can spell that out and send it out to this whole group, including you all. So yeah, we will share that with the attendees.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? This is good. We left plenty of time for Q&A. Oftentimes we're going up until the last minute. And also then we're on track for an on-time departure, which is always a plus.
Hi, Chad. This is Kelsey. I can chime in with a question or two.
Great.
And that I think would be great to hear all the presenters speak to a little bit. Particularly kind of just hoping you can talk through the kind of success or benefit of either your remote or both your remote permitting and inspection processes to the extent you each have them. And kind of particularly with the idea of if you were a listening municipality on the line and were interested in pursuing this further and kind of taking this idea up to the management to get the budget and things like that, what are those benefits, both internally to your staff, to the municipality as a whole, to the residents or installers in that municipality that you think make it worth moving forward with the remote permitting and the remote inspection?
So I spoke about it a little bit, and I think what we in Lowell kind of see is this as a customer service benefit. So that's the and there's a regular questions that come to the staff about when and if the city's going to get online permitting. So I think there's a kind of a drive from the customer side to get online permitting up and running. I do know that we, like every other municipality, kind of are in it's challenging financial times, and so the reality is that we need to figure out ways to provide the same level of customer service with sometimes, not the same amount of staff, or the same amount of staff, and we're going to be busier. So that's the goal, is to try to meet the customers where they are, and because we're getting requests, we're getting folks from contractors who are asking about online permitting. If we can migrate them over there and get them up to speed, the hope is in the long run that what we'll be able to do is use our kind of the resources that we have in a more effective manner than we do when we can really come in and do everything in person. So that's kind of my.
Kelsey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, this is Mark Elsner from City of Framingham, Inspector. We do online permitting, and that's for everything. And one of the things that I have seen in Framingham a lot is things that I don't do remote permitting. Remote inspections. I do in-person inspections. I can look at rack bonding and obtain what I need to do with a very high-powered set of binoculars that I use. What happens is when I do my final inspections, I'm looking at things such as where the panel is located. Is there access? Is it in compliance when they do a line side tap? Is that line side tap on the curve of the wire? So there's a multitude of things that I'm looking at, and I generally do not go into occupied houses. People would have to leave, and generally it's in a basement and social distancing and everything like that, and to look at that. But I am taking the COVID-19 very seriously, and but I just I like networking. I network with Chris, and I appreciate him being on here, and network with a whole bunch of other inspectors. And I think it's a wonderful thing that we can share our information.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for chiming in. I think I'd second the idea that one of the impetuses for this, and I hope something that can keep going forward, is there's a lot to be gained by connecting folks together and sharing what you've all learned about, how you can keep things moving through this time, and the processes that have been working for you. So glad that's going on. Chris or Daryl, any insight from either of you on the kind of the benefits and the whys that you've seen with both your remote permits and inspections?
Oh, the benefit is that during this COVID-19, it's really keeping everybody safe. And as an inspector, we get to control what we want to look at. We can have people zoom in, zoom out, take a look at the surrounding areas. Plus, from an insurance standpoint, if you haven't been properly trained to be on ladders or even being harnessed up, I mean, now you're giving your local municipality a legal liability that if you got hurt on the job site. And again, this is a plus benefit for streamlining these jobs. And the inspections, I mean, these guys are already up on the roof. They're already, kneeling down. They're showing you everything underneath the panels that you can actually possibly take a look at. They got the covers off. You're not exposed to any energized parts or any incidents that might happen if we had an electrical failure during a test. So I truly believe that this going in this direction, helps everybody. And again, at the end of the day, it streamlines these jobs for closure. And I think that's what everybody's looking for.
I'm in agreement with him as well. I think the cons would be connectivity. We just need to let these guys know that a hotspot or some kind of connectivity is part of the toolbox. and they need to have that so we can have a, a productive inspection. But safety is always key, the first and foremost. So for us, the pro is that we've been safe.
That's helpful. One other question that came in through the chat is wondering if how these remote processes and have been sort of incorporated both for energy efficiency and renewables, and has it been in the context of broader climate goals and renewable energy goals and other climate planning efforts?
I can say that our online permitting came out of a larger discussion about sustainability in the city. It was something that we were already kind of contemplating and thinking about, but one of the impetuses from the legislative body was to think about it as a sustainability goal, is to try and reduce the amount of paperwork that comes into the city. So it did. There was definitely contemplation of that as part of the remote permitting thought.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, so we end right on time. And the question is how these processes online and remote might be applied to some of the other clean energy technologies outside of solar. Something like heat pumps, air source heat pumps, for example. And then similarly, if the NREL tool or along those same lines could be also utilized for other technologies.
Yeah, so this is Jeff Cook speaking. Yeah, I think that's exactly what the goal of the solar app is to expand upon or beyond the gains of solar. And so the focus here is residential rooftop PV and storage to start. And then it could be commercial systems thereafter, or electric vehicle charging infrastructure, main panel upgrades, re-roofing, include adding existing PV onto a site that already has some. So there's all sorts of options for expanding the tool beyond its basis in solar. And that is the goal of the whole solar app campaign between our code official jurisdictions and contractor communities, is to make sure that permitting is streamlined for all clean energy technologies, and just all technologies in general is the key goal of the solar app itself.
Can I ask solar app, Mr. Cook, do you have any checklists that you can share for inspections?
Yeah, actually, the tool itself develops, the goal of it is to develop a clear and concise checklist for combination inspectors, so folks that don't always evaluate solar or don't have a solar background necessarily, to know exactly what to look for from the ground all the way up to the roof in that process workflow. And yeah, I'd be happy to share that. There's a kind of a template of what that looks like now, and then of course once we run the pilot project through, I can show you how it actually populate information.
Definitely appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Feel free to follow up and check out the SolSmart program at solsmart.org and follow up with me, Anthony, Kelsey, or anyone else if you have any additional questions, and we can follow up and try and get them answered. So really appreciate your time. and in particular want to thank all of our panelists and hope you all stay safe and have a good remainder of your day.
Yes, and just chime in again with another thank you to all the panelists and Chad and the SolSmart Cadmus folks for moderating. It was really, really appreciated and helpful. And just an encouragement for the kind of continued information sharing that went on here. Chad mentioned this is going to be recorded, and we will make sure that all the attendees get a copy of the slides and the recording. And encourage you to share that to your colleagues in other municipalities or the inspection groups you work with, and hopefully keep these conversations going forward. And please don't hesitate to reach out to MassCEC with ideas or thoughts or questions about how we can help continue to support that process. So thank you again very much to everyone.
Thank you. Stay safe.